Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TradeStation Masterclass. Today is a strategy trading class, and we're going to take a look at some of the functionality that's inside of the TradeStation platform that allows you to backtest strategies and backtest ideas against historical data. And the title is Test Strategies Using Backtest Resolution and Real-Time Order Generation. So this is diving deeper into TradeStation's technology in terms of backtesting strategies and some of the things that you can turn on and off to fine-tune your backtest results. So my name is Jesus Nava. For those that don't know me, my title at TradeStation is Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation Securities. It's always a pleasure for me to talk about the TradeStation technology, and let's use this opportunity for you to ask any questions on the platform, just to make sure that we all have a good grasp on the technology and we're able to take advantage of it. Before we get started, the usual disclosures, just keep in mind that every symbol and idea that I talk about is for educational purposes only. These are not recommendations of TradeStation, and also that active trading is not suitable for everyone. Past historical performance is no guarantee of future results. Let's go ahead and jump over to the TradeStation platform and get this class started. And just to frame the topic of today's presentation, this is a chart of Microsoft. I've set up my chart on a daily time frame. And what we're going to do today is we're going to just take a built-in strategy, not for showing what the strategy can do, but some of the things that you can do to the strategy to change its methodology, to change its calculation. Let's take a look. I'm going to combine this daily chart of Microsoft with a simple study that probably everyone here knows. So let me go here to studies. At study, it's the simple moving average. Straightforward mathematical calculation. Just takes a number of closing prices, whatever that number is, and averages them and plots that as a moving line across the chart. Let me go here to the M's, moving average one line. There we go. I'm not going to worry about the parameters. I'm just going to use the default 9 period. Okay, so the line is there, and we're going to couple this with a strategy that is also built in to TradeStation, which is the moving average cross. So studies, add strategy, and we have multiple moving average cross strategies. I am going to use the LE, which is the long entry side of the strategy. I'm going to hold down my control key, and I'm going to click on the SE of that strategy, which is the short entry. If you have two entries that are opposites, in this case, we have a long entry and a short entry, what the strategy does, it reverses one position to establish the other. On an equities account, you cannot be short and long at the same time on the stock that you're trading. So whenever you add strategies that are opposing, in this case, a long entry and a short entry, one will exit the other. So if you're on a long trade and all of a sudden the strategy says, oh, you need to enter a short trade, what it'll do, it'll close your short trade. I'm sorry, it'll close your long trade and then enter you short. So that's the concept here, or the idea here. We're going to combine these two strategies so that they interact with each other. Otherwise, and I've said this in many of my strategy trading classes, if you just add one side, if you just add the long entry, it will take a trade, but just one single trade, waiting for something different to happen, because that's the way that strategies are set up. You put them on the chart, and whatever they were designed to do, they'll do it, and then wait for something else, whether that is an exit based on maybe a profit target or a stop loss. It can also be another technical exit, like if it crosses, below the moving average in this case, or it can be another entry, in this case, a short entry, which interacts with my long entry. I don't want to change the parameters here yet. What I am going to do is I'm going to uncheck this box that says prompt for editing. So the strategy goes right onto the chart. If you haven't played with strategies before, I mean, this is a fascinating technology that TradeStation supports, and it allows you to test ideas, trading ideas. In this case, we're testing how the strategy would behave if you were taking a trade every time the price crosses over or under that moving average. Notice that the strategy is finding every single instance where that trade would have happened. Here we have the price bars above the moving average, and all of a sudden when they cross under, it generates a short entry. Very clear and very straightforward. Again, we have a few candles that are below the moving average, but then we have a crossover to the upside, and then we have the long entry generating that trade. So it'll do exactly what the strategy is designed to do. However, I did want to talk a little bit about what strategies do and how they're calculated, because it's important that we do that. It's important that we understand how strategies are calculated, because if you are going to test a strategy, there's got to be an understanding of the mechanics behind what the strategy is doing so that you can tweak it, so that you can make it better. If you don't have that understanding, then it's very difficult to know where the values are coming from. One thing that is characteristic of strategies on the TradeStation platform is that they calculate on the closing price of the bar. This is something default to the strategy, but you can change that. So let's talk a little bit about what the default is. In this case, this is the moving average strategy. It waits for the closing price to happen, so the bar is closed. It'll evaluate the strategy's rules, in this case, whether the price crossed above or below that moving average. And if the condition is true, it'll generate a trade for the next bar. In this case, very simple and very straightforward behavior. In fact, I want to show you the easy language of the strategy. I usually go to easy language because it's very telling about what the strategy is doing, especially the type of orders that are being placed for a particular setup. In this case, I want to go to the long entry easy language. I'm going to go here and right click on one of these arrows. You can do that from any arrow of the strategy. And I'm going to go here to edit easy language and open up moving average cross LE. So this opens up the development environment. It opens up the easy language code for this particular strategy. Let me make the font of the development environment a little bit bigger and bolder so it's easier to read. I'm going to go here to the code font. My code here, let me make it bold and 12. I'm going to click OK. There we go. So that's a little bit easier to read. All right, so here's the command. Oh, I also like to turn on reference rows. Let me go here to Tools, Options, and on the General tab, I'm going to turn on something called line numbers. Because then I can say on line 24, and it's easier for you to follow where I'm pointing right. On line 24 of the code, it says buy, and this is the signal of the moving average cross, long entry, next bar at market. So the type of order that the strategy generates, it's a market order. So if you're generating a market order on the close of a candlestick, of course, the fill or the execution of that trade cannot be on that same candle where the criteria is met. The next available price where the strategy can be executed is the next bar, and it is going to be the opening tick of the bar. So let's go ahead and take a look at my strategy and on the chart so that you can see exactly what I mean by that. We were talking about this trade right here, right? Where the candlesticks are above the moving average and all of a sudden they cross under. But notice where the entry or the short entry is. It seems like it's a little delayed. On this candle, criteria was not met. But on this red candle, the down candle, we see that the price activity closed below the moving average. So it was on this candle that the strategy conditions were met. But it's not until the next bar when the strategy is able to execute that trade, because that's the next available price. And that's by default, as I said before, this is the default strategy behavior. A lot of times you're going to ask yourself, or you're going to tell yourself, well, I don't really want to wait until the next bar. I want to be able to place the trade as it happens, as the condition happens. So for that reason, we have a checkbox that I'm going to show you where it is that changes the calculation of the strategy and makes it generate a trade intra-bar. It doesn't wait until the close of the bar. It just looks at the prices within that bar and generates that order whenever the conditions are met. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. and where that checkbox is. I'm going to go here to the strategy settings. Let me double click here. And you can do it for both strategies. So every strategy will be unique, or will have a unique setting, and you can turn on and off each one of the strategies as you see fit. For example, here in the long entry is the one that's highlighted. I'm going to click on Customize here on the right-hand side. And in the Calculation tab is where you control how the strategy is calculated. Again, just keep in the back of your mind that the default is that the strategy will calculate on the close of the bar. But now I can come here to the calculation of the strategy and say, well, I want to enable Intrabar Order Generation and Calculation. There's a few things here to pay attention to, like, okay, if you turn this on, then you have to figure out, okay, how many times do I allow this strategy to trade within the bar? Because if you turn on this feature, you're actually letting the strategy generate a trade possibly on every single tick. So as a trader, you may say, well, that's all good and dandy, but I don't want to have hundreds of trades in one bar, especially, if you're looking at a daily chart here. This is the daily chart of Microsoft. If you turn this on, you're letting the strategy not only calculate on the closing price of the bar, but on every single tick that happens on the bar. So yeah, potentially the strategy could generate hundreds and hundreds of trades in one day. So there are some things you can do to limit that. For example, the bullet point here that is selected is limit entries from all signals in this strategy to once per bar. So you are allowing the strategy to generate the entry within the bar, but only do it once. I don't want you to do it multiple times within that bar, which is one of the options. Of course, you have other options here. Like, for example, I can set it to a maximum of 3, and then limit the entries from the same signal to once per bar. And the default one is the middle one, which is limit entries from all signals in this strategy to once per bar. And the exit, of course, in this case, does not apply because this is a strategy designed to enter. If it was a strategy designed to exit, then the exit bullet points here would apply. I'm just going to click OK. And I'm going to do the same thing here for the short entry, especially because so we were monitoring the trade that was right here on this bar. So I want to make sure that I modify the short entry calculation because that's what's going to affect that particular entry. So the short entry is highlighted. I'm going to click on Customize, then Calculation, and put a check right here on Enable Intrabar Order Generation and Calculation. I'm going to leave the settings as they are, and I'm just going to click OK. And then click on Close. So you see the strategy changed. The strategy changed for the following reason. I'm not sure if you can catch the reason why it changed. We don't have that original entry or short entry down here. It actually happened on this candle over here back in history. Why did it happen there? It happened there because we opened up the strategy to look at other prices inside the candle. Now it's not only looking at the closing price, and by the way, on a daily chart, the only prices that the strategy has access to are the 4 price data points that make up the candle, which are the open, the high, the low, and the close. It only sees those 4 prices. It's still not able to see inside the bar per se, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But for now, it's looking at the open, and it's doing its evaluation on the opening price. Then it goes to the high or the low, depending on which one is closer. By the way, that's something that I just told you, that it's there are certain assumptions that the strategy makes. For example, it decides where the price goes once the candlestick opens, because once a candlestick opens, the prices could go up and reach the high, or could go down and reach the low. But, historically, we don't know exactly how it happened. We could know if we load, the minute resolution of prices and see exactly where the price went. But on a daily bar, a daily candle, the strategy only sees open, high, low, and close. So in reality, it doesn't know which price was hit first. It doesn't know if it hit the high first or the low first. So it's going to make assumptions as to where the price went. And in this case, it's going to hit the price that is closest to the opening price. So if we look at this candle, the opening price is up here. So it evaluates the condition on the opening price. It sees that the strategy criteria is not met. It'll go to the high next because that's the closest to the open. It'll evaluate the condition again and say, not quite, doesn't hit it there. But then it's going to come down here to the low, and the low doesn't quite generate the trade either. It's actually on the closing price when the trade is generated. Let me go ahead and click here and hold my mouse pointer. When you click on the background for you to get the data tips, and you put that vertical line on where the strategy has that arrow, it'll tell you the details on the strategy right there at the bottom. Notice that it sold 100 shares at 369.85, and then it sold short 100 shares at 369.85. And if we look at all the different prices on that candle, notice that that entry price matches the closing price, 369.85. But this feature that we turned on is doing exactly what we just explained. It's going to look at the opening, then the high or the low, depending on which one is closest. And then it's going to take out the closing price and decide which one of the prices hits the criteria. Let's take a look at maybe some other values here. Let's take a look at this entry right here. On this entry, let's see. No, that's still hitting the closing price. Okay, right here. This is a clear example where the signal is not on the close of the bar. If I click on the background and I hold it, notice how the short entry, which is right there at the bottom of this data tips window, happened at 369.84. Which one of the prices on the candlestick does it match? It matches the low of the bar. So you can see how the fill or the transaction was executed at the low of the bar. And this is possible because we turned on Intrabar Order Generation. So it's going to check all the price points and see which one hits the criteria. But you can see that it only enters once on every single bar. So that explains why on this bar, the criteria was met, because it was a down bar. And in the calculation of the moving average, there was a crossover of that average at some point during that bar. There's a calculated value that crossed that bar. All right. Hopefully that makes sense, because I'm going to go on to explaining intrabar order generation right now, which adds a little bit more detail to what the strategy is doing. To recap, we already established that the strategy only looks at open, high, low, close to determine where the signal is going to be placed, because that's what the strategy sees. You have a candlestick, and all the strategy sees is the open, high, low, and close. It doesn't see the prices in between. That's why we talked about the strategy making assumptions as to where the price went. And it uses proximity to the opening price to decide where the price is going. If it's closer to the high, it'll go to the high first. But if it's closer to the low, it'll go to the low first. Now let's go ahead and turn on this feature, which will reduce the amount of assumptions or the magnitude of the assumption that the strategy needs to make. Because many times on a daily chart like this, you have a big range. I mean, the difference between the high and the low is huge. And, sometimes determining where the price went, if it went up or high, could make a trade profitable or not, especially if you have strategies like a profit target and a stop loss. Imagine if you're in a daily bar and your profit target and your stop loss both fall within the range of that bar. Which one is hit first? Well, the strategy doesn't know. The strategy just makes an assumption, again, based on that proximity to the opening price. And it'll decide if the strategy is losing or winning based on that proximity. So sometimes when you pull up a strategy performance report, all those things you have to keep in mind, because the profit or loss that you're seeing inside the report may not be exactly accurate. Let's call it accurate, but I want you guys to keep it in the back of your mind. That's not something that should be changed all the time. I'm showing you these features like the Intrabar Order Generation and what we're going to take a look at next. And many times it sounds like, oh, but then I should have this feature turned on all the time because it seems like I have more resolution. It seems like the strategy looks at all the prices, but not necessarily. A lot of times you want to go back to the way that the strategy calculates by default, which is at the close of the bar. Many times when you have a strategy, especially like this one in particular, which is a moving average strategy, you may want to wait until the closing of that bar just for the just to stay true to what the strategy says or the strategy idea, which is, crossing over a particular moving average. If you look at all the candles up here, that are above this moving average, you can tell that none of them closed below the moving average. But notice what happened when we turned on the Intrabar Order Generation. We have a short entry up here, which, in my opinion, I wouldn't have taken because the strategy or the moving average strategy is designed for you to have confirmation at the close of the bar. So maybe this feature that we turned on just now, which is the Intrabar Order Generation, goes against the nature of the strategy, which is waiting for confirmation on the close. So don't think that by giving the strategy more data, it's going to make the strategy better, because it all depends on what the main strategy is, or the main trading idea is. Let me go ahead and provide the strategy more data. To recap, we know that the strategy only sees 4 prices. It sees the open, the high, the low, and the close. But now we're going to tell it, use more data. So I'm going to come over here to the strategy. Let me go ahead and double click on any one of these arrows. And I'm going to go to properties for all here on the right-hand side. Notice that it's different than clicking customize. You click customize to access the Intrabar Order Generation. You go to properties for all to access what's called the backtesting resolution. It's called backtesting resolution because you are providing the strategy more data points, more details in the prices. And the more details you provide the strategy, the more accurate the calculations are going to be. Or let's put it a different way, the less assumptions the strategy is going to make. So I'm going to turn that on. It says look inside bar backtesting, and I'm going to set it to 1 minute. I'm going to set it to 1 minute and not 1 tick, just for the reason that we only hold 6 months of historical data on tick resolution. So I have a daily chart here that probably goes back, I didn't check, but it probably goes back at least 3 years. So I'm not going to have 3 years of tick data on this chart, unless I've accumulated it throughout the years of my use of TradeStation, because that's another story. But if I want to do the backtesting resolution and be sure that I have, that resolution for all the bars on the chart, I'm just going to set it to minutes, because I know for sure that on a 1 minute time frame, our database goes back, dozens of years. So let's go ahead and set it to 1 minute, and I'm going to click OK. And OK again. That changes the strategy. Notice that it says waiting for data. It's going to take longer for the strategy to recalculate, because now we've turned this daily chart into a semi 1 minute chart, because we've opened up the doors to the strategy so that it can see inside the bar. So rather than just seeing the open, high, low, close bar of one day, now the strategy is able to see the open, high, low, close of every 1 minute candle inside of that daily candle. That is very interesting and a great technology for you to turn on if you really want to have that if you really want to have that look inside bar backtesting resolution. Notice what happened to this entry, which we were analyzing just a moment ago. Do you guys see where the entry is? By the way, when you look at arrows on a strategy, there's 2 components. There's going to be the little arrow, in this case is a red arrow, pointing down on the actual candle, just as a marker. But then there's another little marker in the candle, which is a little triangle, where the strategy actually placed the trade. So there's two different markings on each one of the candles. The arrow pointing, either if it's a long entry, it's going to be at the bottom. It's going to be, if it's a short entry, it's going to be at the top. Just letting you know there's a strategy signal right here. And in addition to that signal, there's a little marking on the candle that tells you the price that the strategy got filled at. So make sure that you look at the two little components of that strategy signal because they go together. In this candlestick that we were looking at, we see the red arrow pointing at the candle, but notice where the entry is. The entry is not on the closing price as it was before. It's not even on one of the main prices of the candle. It's not in the open, it's not in the high or the low or the close. Where is it? Somewhere in between. Notice I'm clicking on the background. I'm looking at the strategy details at the bottom. It says it's shorted 100 shares at 368.88, and you don't see that price matched in any of the main prices of the candle. Why? Because we provided that data to the strategy and said, go ahead and look inside the bar, look at 1 minute time frame, and decide whether the strategy generated the signal there or not. And you can see with more precision where the prices crossed the moving average in real time. Of course, it's not to the level of tick data. I mean, if you enable it to tick data, then it'll be completely accurate. It'll be exactly at the moment where we had that crossover. In this case, we have a very high resolution because we're turning a daily chart into 1 minute data. So it does provide a little bit more accuracy if that's something that you're looking for. In this case, as I explained before, on my moving average strategy, it doesn't help because it didn't cross over on the close. I'm still on this uptrend. So maybe on the moving average strategy, I wouldn't have taken that trade. But I used the moving average example because it's simple to understand. And now you're able to see that this backtesting resolution allows the strategy to be a little bit more accurate in its calculation if that's something you're looking for. Especially, if in real time you are dependent on that real-time calculation and making sure that your signals are generated on the exact moment when the rules are met, then this is probably something that interests you, something that you would want to apply to your historical backtest to see how your strategy behaves. Because if your strategy is dependent on that tick by tick movement and the accuracy of the entry based on that tick by tick movement, then you have to bring that also into the backtesting. Again, by default, the backtesting will only generate entries on the close of the bar. So there's two things you have to turn on. First of all, the ability for the strategy to generate intra-bar. Where did we see that? Again, you format the strategy. In this case, you can just double click on any of those signals. You go to the Customize button, and then you turn that on here, Enable Intrabar Order Generation. The first step. Then you have to go to the Properties for All and provide the chart with Look Inside Bar Backtesting so that it has more resolution and it has more data. And that way, your historical backtest will closely resemble what's happening in real time if your strategy rules are dependent on that tick-by-tick movement. Are there any questions on this? I know the chat is open. I haven't seen any questions yet, but I did want to explain, what these two settings do. Let me see, on the strategy, on this moving average strategy, I don't think the strategy performance report would have been immensely affected. Let's go ahead and see. Okay, this is the strategy performance report of this moving average, looking at both of the technology turned on, where we have Intrabar Order Generation turned on, and we have Look Inside Bar Backtesting turned on. You can see that in a span of 2 years, you can see the span right here at the very top on the title bar. It goes from 124 2022 to 123 2024. So we have 2 years of data. 86 trades, a profit factor of 1.37, net profit $7,000. Let's go ahead and turn off those two features and see how the strategy did. Let me go ahead and double click here. I can leave that right here in the background. I'm going to go to Customize, turn this feature off for the long entry. I'm going to go to the short entry, customize and turn that off as well for the short entry. I'm going to go to properties for all and then uncheck the look inside bar backtesting. I'm going to click OK and then click on close. There we go. For this example, it looks like the strategy performed better with those two features turned on. Again, going against the nature of the strategy, which is looking for confirmation on the close of the candle. But in this particular example, which is Microsoft, 2 years of historical data, then we see that improved the performance. Of course, this is all historical. This is all an example. Just to remember that any references to historical performance is no guarantee that this will happen going forward. But you can see the effect that those settings can have on the performance of a strategy. We are looking at both. We are looking at a historical backtest, and we're also looking at the ability for you to turn on this strategy for real-time execution. When you put a strategy instead of a chart, it doesn't get automated. It doesn't get automated immediately. You do have to go through some settings and some checkboxes to turn on execution. But any strategy that you put on a chart does have that ability for you to turn on for execution. And to answer your second part of the question, where if you have to be logged on in order for the strategy to execute, the answer is yes. TradeStation does not have a strategy automation service in the cloud. We don't support that technology yet. TradeStation is in development at the moment. There's a lot of things that are coming down the pipe. I cannot say for sure if this is one of those things, but for now, the strategy, if it's running in an automated mode, you'd have to have your TradeStation open. It would have to be connected to the internet so that it has real-time data to feed into your platform and then generate the trades as they happen. But yes, your computer would be the strategy engine in this case. All right, guys, I appreciate the time you spent with me here today. Check out our events calendar for upcoming sessions. Thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you in one of my future classes. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.